push the camera a little bit over so you don't have to see my hairy leg while I prop it up. So, this is how the rhinoceros got his skin. Once upon a time, on an uninhabited island on the shores of the Red Sea, there lived a Parsee, whose hat from whose hat the rays of the sun were reflected in more than oriental splendor. And the Parsee lived by the Red Sea with nothing but his hat and his knife, and a cooking stove of the kind that you must particularly never touch. And one day he took flour and water and currants and plums and sugar and things, and he made himself one cake, which was 2 feet across and 3 feet thick. Almost big enough. It was indeed a superior comestible. That's magic. And he put it on the stove because he was allowed to cook on that stove, and he baked it and baked it and baked it until it was all done brown and smelt most sentimental. But just as he was going to eat it, there came down the beach from the altogether uninhabited interior one rhinoceros, with a horn on his nose, 2 piggy eyes, and very few manners. In those days the rhinoceros's skin fitted him quite tightly. There were no wrinkles in it anywhere, and he looked exactly like a Noah's Ark rhinoceros, but of course much bigger. All the same, he had no manners then, he has no manners now, and he will never have any manners. He said, "How?" And the Parsee left that cake and climbed to the top of a palm tree with nothing but his hat, from which the rays of the sun were always reflected in more than oriental splendor. And the rhinoceros upset the oil stove with his nose, and the cake rolled in the sand, and he spiked the cake with a horn on his nose, and he ate it, and he went away, waving his tail to the desolate and exclusively uninhabited interior, which abuts on the islands of Mazandaran, Socotora, and promontories of the larger equinox. Then the Parsee came down from his palm tree, and put the stove on its legs, and recited the following sloka, which, as you may not have heard, I will now proceed to relate. Them that takes the cakes, which the Parsee man bakes, makes dreadful mistakes. And there was a great deal more in that than you should think, because 5 weeks later there was a heat wave in the Red Sea, and everyone took off their clothes, all of the clothes that they had, and the Parsee took off his hat, but the rhinoceros took off his skin and carried it over his shoulder as he came down to the beach to bathe. In those days it buttoned underneath with 3 buttons, and it looked like a waterproof. So a rain slicker. He said nothing whatever about the Parsee's cake because he had eaten it all, and he never had any manners, then, since, or henceforward. He waddled straight into the water, and blew bubbles through his nose, leaving his skin on the beach. Presently the Parsee came by and found the skin, and smiled one smile that ran round his face 2 whole times. Then he danced 3 times around the skin and rubbed his hands. Then he went up to his camp and filled his hat with cake crumbs, for the Parsee never ate anything but cake, and he never swept out his camp. He took that skin, and he shook that skin, and he scrubbed that skin, and he rubbed that skin, just as full of old, dry, stale, tickly cake crumbs, and some burnt currants as ever it could possibly hold. Then he climbed up to the top of the palm tree and waited for a rhinoceros to come out of the water and put it on. And the rhinoceros did. He buttoned it up with the 3 buttons, and it tickled like cake crumbs in bed. Then he wanted to scratch, but that made it worse, and then he lay down on the sands and he rolled, and every time he rolled, the cake crumbs tickled him. Worse and worse. Then he ran to a palm tree and rubbed himself against it. He rubbed so much and so hard, he rubbed his skin into a great fold over his shoulder, and another fold underneath where the buttons used to be, but he rubbed the buttons off. And he rubbed more folds over his legs, and he spoiled his temper, but it didn't make the least bit of difference to the cake crumbs. They were inside his skin, and they tickled. So he went home very angry indeed, and horribly scratchy. And from that day to this, every rhinoceros had great folds in his skin, and a very bad temper, and no manners. And all on account of the cake crumbs inside. But the Parsee came down from his palm tree, wearing his hat, from which the rays of the sun were reflected in more than oriental splendor, packed up his cooking stove, and went away in the direction of Orotavo, Amygdala, the upland meadows of Anantarivo, and the marshes of Sonaput. So, these pictures you don't need to see. This uninhabited island off the Cape of Gardafui, by the beaches of Socotora, and the pink Arabian Sea, but it's hot, too hot Suez for the likes of you and me ever to go in a P&O and call on the cake Parsee. That was only 5 minutes, so you're gonna get a double helping in one video. So this one is called "How the Leopard Got His Spots." In the days when everybody started fair, best beloved, the leopard lived in a place called the High Veld. Remember, it wasn't the Low Veld or the Bush Veld, nor the Sour Veld, but the exclusively bare, hot, shiny High Veld, where there was sand and sandy-colored rock, and exclusively tufts of sandy yellowish grass. The giraffe and the zebra and the eland and the kudu and the hartebeest lived there, and there exclusively sandy yellow brownish all over. But the leopard, he was the exclusivest, sandiest, yellowest, brownest of them all, a grayish, yellowish, catty-shaped kind of a beast, and he matched the exclusively yellowish, grayish, brownish color of the high veld to one hair. This was very bad for the giraffe and the zebra and for the rest of them, for he would lie down by the exclusively yellowish, grayish, brownish stone or a clump of grass, and when the giraffe or the zebra or the eland or the kudu or the bushbuck or the bontybuck came by, he would surprise them out of their jumpsome lives. He would indeed, and also there was an Ethiopian with bows and arrows, exclusively grayish, brownish, yellowish man he was like them, who lived on the high veld with the leopard, and the two used to hunt together, the Ethiopian with his bows and arrows, and the leopard exclusively with teeth and claws, till the giraffe and the eland and the kudu and the quagga and all the rest of them didn't know which way to jump, O best beloved. They didn't indeed. After a long time, things lived forever so long in those days. They learned to avoid anything that looked like a leopard or an Ethiopian, and bit by bit, the giraffe began it because his legs were longest. They went away from the high veld. They scuttled for days and days, till they came to the great forest, exclusively full of trees and bushes and stripy, speckly, patchy, blacky shadows, and there they hid, and after another long time, and with standing half in shade and half out of it, and what with the slippery, slidey shadows of the tree falling on them, the giraffe grew blotchy, and the zebra grew stripy, and the eland and kudu grew darker, with little wavy gray lines on the backs like the bark on a tree trunk. And so, though you could hear them and you could smell them, you could very seldom see them, and then only when you knew precisely where to look. They had a beautiful time in the exclusively speckly shadows of the forest, while the leopard and the Ethiopian ran over the exclusively grayish, yellowish, reddish high veld outside, wondering where all their breakfasts and their dinners and their teas had gone. At last they were so hungry that they ate rats and beetles and rock rabbits, and the leopard and the Ethiopian, and wow, sounded very much like they ate themselves. And then they had a very big tummy ache, both together, and then they met Bavian, the dog-headed barking baboon, who is quite the wisest animal in all of South Africa. Said leopard to Bavian, and it was a very hot day, "Where is all the game gone?" And Bavian winked. He knew. Try that. Don't need both eyes for that. He knew. Said the Ethiopian to the Bavian, "Can you tell me the present habitat of the aboriginal fauna?" That meant just the same thing, but the Ethiopian always used long words. He was a grown-up. And the Bavian winked. He knew. Then, said the Bavian, "The game has gone into other spots, and my advice to you, leopard, is to go into other spots as soon as you can." And the Ethiopian said, "That is all very fine, but I wish to know whither the aboriginal fauna has migrated." Then said Bavian, "The aboriginal fauna has joined the aboriginal flora, because it is high time for a change, and my advice to you, Ethiopian, is to change as soon as you can." That puzzled the leopard and the Ethiopian, but they set off to look for the aboriginal flora, and presently, after ever so many days, they saw a great, high, tall forest full of tree trunks, all exclusively speckled and spotted and dotted and splashed and slashed and hatched and cross-hatched with shadows. Book's making fun of me now and says, "Say that quickly aloud and you will see how very shadowy the forest must have been." "What is this?" said the leopard. "It is so exclusively dark and yet so full of little pieces of light." I don't know, said the Ethiopian, but it ought to be the aboriginal flora. I can smell giraffe, and I can hear giraffe, but I can't see giraffe. That's curious, said the leopard. I suppose it is because we have just come in out of the sunshine. I can smell zebra, I can hear zebra, but I can't see zebra. Wait a bit, said the Ethiopian. It's been a long time since we've hunted them. Perhaps we've forgotten what they look like. Fiddle, said the leopard. I remember them perfectly on high veld, especially their marrow bones. Giraffe was about 17 feet high, of exclusively fulvous golden yellow from head to heel, and zebra is about 4.5 feet high, of exclusively gray fawn color from head to heel. Said the Ethiopian, looking into the speckly shadows of the aboriginal flora forest. Then they ought to show up in this dark place like ripe bananas in a smokehouse. But they didn't. And the leopard and the Ethiopian hunted all day, and though they could smell and hear them, they never saw a single one of them. Oh, for goodness sake, said the leopard at tea time. Let us wait until it gets dark. This daylight hunting is a perfect scandal. So they waited until dark, and then Leopard heard something breathing sniffily in the starlight that fell all stripy through the branches, and he jumped at the noise, and it smelt like zebra, and it felt like zebra, and when he knocked it down, it kicked quite like zebra. But he couldn't see it, so he said, Be quiet, you, O person without any form. I'm going to sit on your head until morning, because there is something about you that I don't understand. Presently he heard a grunt and a crash and a scramble, and the Ethiopian called out, I've got a thing that I can't see. It smells like giraffe and it kicks like giraffe, but it hasn't any form. Well, don't you trust it, said Leopard. Sit on its head till morning, same as me. They haven't any form, any of them. So they sat down on them hard till bright morning time, and then Leopard said, What have you at the end of the table, brother? And the Ethiopian scratched his head and said, Well, it ought to be exclusively rich in fulvous orange tawny from head to toe giraffe, but it is covered all over with chestnut blotches. What have you at your end of the table, brother? And the leopard scratched his head and said, It ought to be exclusively delicate grayish fawn, and it ought to be zebra, but it is covered all over with black and purple stripes. What in the world have you been doing to yourself, zebra? Don't you know that if you were on the high veld, I could see you 10 miles off? You haven't any form. Yes, said the zebra, but this isn't the high veld. Can't you see? Well, I can now, said the leopard, but I couldn't all of yesterday. How was it done? Well, let us up, said Zebra, and we will show you. And they let Zebra and Giraffe up, and Zebra moved away to some little thorn bushes where the sunlight fell all stripy, and Giraffe moved off to some tallish trees where the shadows were all blotchy. Now watch, said the Zebra and the Giraffe. This is the way it's done. 1, 2, 3. And where's your breakfast? Leopard stared, and Ethiopian stared, but all they could see were stripy shadows and blotched shadows in the forest, but never a sign of zebra nor giraffe. They had just walked off and hidden themselves in the shadowy forest. Hi, said the Ethiopian. That's a trick worth learning. Take a lesson by it, Leopard. You show up in this dark place like a bar of soap in a coal scuttle. Oh-ho, said the Leopard. Would it surprise you very much to know that you show up in this dark place like a mustard plaster on a sack of coals? Well, calling names won't catch dinner, said the Ethiopian. The long and the little of it is that we don't match our backgrounds. I'm going to take Bavian's advice. He told me to change, and as I've nothing to change except my skin, I'm going to change that. What to? Said Leopard, tremendously excited. To a nice working blackish-brownish color with a little purple in it, and touches of slaty blue. It will be the very thing for hiding in the hollows and behind trees. So he changed his skin then and there, and the Leopard was more excited than ever. He had never seen a man change his skin before. But what about me? He said, when the Ethiopian had worked his last little finger into his fine new black skin. Well, you take Bavian's advice too. He told you to go into spots. So I did, said Leopard. I went into other spots as fast as I could. I went to this spot with you, and a lot of good it is done with. I went into other spots as fast as I could. I went to this spot with you, and a lot of good it has done me. Oh, said the Ethiopian. Bavian didn't mean spots in South Africa. He meant spots on your skin. What's the use of that? said the leopard. Well, think of giraffe, said the Ethiopian. Or, if you prefer stripes, think of zebra. They find their spots in the stripes and then give them perfect satisfaction. Said the leopard. I wouldn't look like zebra, not for ever so. Well, make up your mind, said the Ethiopian, because I'd hate to go hunting without you, but I must if you insist on looking like a sunflower against a tarred fence. Well, I'll take spots then, said the leopard, but don't make 'em too vulgar big. I don't want to look like giraffe, not for ever so. Oh, I'll make them with the tips of my fingers, said the Ethiopian. There's plenty of black left on my skin still. Stand over. And then the Ethiopian put his 5 fingers close together, and there was plenty of black left on his new skin still, and pressed them all over leopard. Wherever the 5 fingers touched, they left 5 little black marks, all close together. You can see them on any leopard skin you like, best beloved. Sometimes the fingers slipped and the marks got a little blurred. But if you look closely at any leopard now, you will see that there are always 5 spots off of 5 black fingertips. Now you are a beauty, said the Ethiopian. You can lie on the bare ground and look like a heap of pebbles. You can lie out on the naked rocks and look like a piece of pudding stone. You can lie out on a leafy branch and look like sunshine sifting through leaves. And you can lie right across the center of a path and look like nothing in particular. Think of that and purr. Oh, but if I'm all this, said the leopard, why don't you go all spotty too? Oh, plain black's the best for me, said the Ethiopian. Now come along and we'll see if we can't get even with Mr. 1, 2, 3, where's your breakfast? So they went away and lived happily ever afterward, best beloved, and that is all. Oh, and now when you will hear grown-ups say, can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots? I don't think even grown-ups would keep on saying such a silly thing if the leopard and the Ethiopian hadn't done it once, do you? But they will never do it again, best beloved. They are quite content as they are. I am the most wise Bavian, saying in most wise tones, let us melt into the landscape, just us 2 by our lones. People have come in a carriage calling, but Mummy is here. Yes, I can go if you take me. Nurse says she don't care. Let's go up to the pigsties and sit on the farmyard rails. Let's say things to the bunnies and watch 'em skitter their tails. Let's anything, Daddy, so long as it's you and me, and going truly exploring and not being in till tea. Here's your boots, I brought 'em, and here's your cap and stick, and here's your pipe and tobacco. Oh, come along out of it, quick. So. This is Wise Bavian, the dog-headed baboon who is quite the wisest animal in all of South Africa. I've drawn him from a statue that I made up from my own head, and I've written his name on his belt and in his shoulder, and on his shoulder and on the thing he is sitting on. I've written it in his I have written it in what is not called Coptic and hieroglyphic and cuneiformic and Bengalic and Burmic and Hebric, all because he is so wise. He is not beautiful, but he is very wise, and I should like to paint him with paint-box colors, but I am not allowed. The umbrella-ish thing about his head is the conventional mane. So it looks like a little old lady. This is the picture of the leopard and the Ethiopian after they had gone and taken the wise Bavian's advice. The leopard had gone into other spots, and the Ethiopian had changed his skin. The Ethiopian's name was Sambo. The leopard was called Spots, and he has been called Spots ever since. They are out hunting in the speckly forest, and they are looking for Mr. 1, 2, 3, where's your breakfast? If you look a little, you will see 1, 2, 3 not too far away. The Ethiopian is hidden behind a splotchy, blotchy tree because it matches his skin, and the leopard is laying beside a speckly bank of stones because it matches his spots. Mr. 1, 2, 3, where's your breakfast is standing up eating leaves from a tall tree. This is really a puzzle picture like Find the Cat. It's kind of funny when I run into people from Africa. Almost every single time, they have ended up being either Ethiopian or Algerian. Or no, I think I've met some Nigerians as well, including Baba Dumbe. He's a very good guy. Still is, I hope. So, with that, we have read all of the good ones. I skipped out on 3. You can get the book yourself if you want to read the other 3. I find them boring. So, that is 2 books done this summer, dearest. So, I hope it makes you happy. I hope it helps you sleep. I am about to zonk out because it is 1:15 bedtime. So, get some rest and do your best and try to become somebody you can be proud of. And if people can hate you for no reason, then I can love you for exactly the same. So, sleep well, dear.